Welcome into the Georgia Vote bonus roundtable. Joining us, as usual, Democratic strategist Howard Franklin, Republican strategist Stephen Lawson, all veterans of the Georgia Vote roundtable. If you were watching us Sunday morning on television, you saw both of these guys here. We have more to talk about, though. It's never enough time in Georgia politics. We talked about the Senate race on television. Let's talk about the governor's race, because it is getting to crunch time there, too. We're, what, seven-ish weeks out from the primary now? Howard, let's start with you. You've got a lot of Democrats running in this gubernatorial primary. Who's the front runner? And is it a race for the runoff, or can one of these candidates win it outright?
Yeah, I think you've got enough candidates that it's very likely going to go to a runoff that we'll see a month after the May 19th primary. I think everyone, odds-on favorite, folks would say, most name recognition and most broadly known, having been the mayor and having been a CNN contributor, I think, is former Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. And I think there is a very aggressive race for second place making to the runoff. And as we note oftentimes in Georgia politics, going into the runoff in first place often doesn't guarantee you the berth and the nomination going into the general election. I think the thing that we're waiting for here is to see the other candidates get serious, right? We've only had one candidate go up on television, spend any meaningful money, and really try to introduce himself to voters.
And that's former State Senator Jason Estevez.
Exactly, and I think that, I expect that there'll be a lot of others who will look to follow in his footsteps, but you got to worry if you're one of those candidates that with Rick Jackson blanketing the airwaves, with other candidates who will have the financial resource to go up on television, if you wait until too late, the beginning of the early voting period, you'll really be competing not just with the folks who are on air right now, but with a bevy of other candidates who are trying to introduce themselves.
And it is a big field. We'll come back to the Democratic race in a moment, but Stephen, I want to bring you in and talk about the Republican side, because it is, as Howard pointed out, impacting everybody running right now. Rick Jackson dumping a lot of money into this contest. He's driving up ad rates for everybody else who wants to get up on air, and he's really scrambled what I think was the consensus thinking about how this primary was going to go 3 months ago before he got in the race. Where do things stand on the Republican side of this governor's race now?
Yeah, there's no lack of fireworks. I mean, I think Rick Jackson's entrance into the race, overturned the apple cart on this race. It was, by and large, a very sleepy race. Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones was by far the front runner in that race, and I think Rick Jackson has totally changed that dynamic. I would argue that Rick Jackson is probably the front runner at this point. I think the Lieutenant Governor is close behind him. I think what's going to be really interesting to watch, we are seeing them on this channel and others blanketing the airwaves with negative attacks. I think that's starting to wear on some of our voters. I think what they've got to do, including the other candidates, is get back to telling the positive message about what they stand for and what they believe in and what they want to do as governor. I think that is a lane that the lieutenant governor is going to have to start running in to shore up.
Because there is, Howard, go ahead, and I have a follow-up, but you go ahead.
I just want to mention being on this program several months ago, and I think it was right around the time that Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones made the $10 million loan to his leadership committee at the time. And I think at the time I said, it doesn't really matter how you come about these dollars. Really matters how you spend them. And you got to look at Rick Jackson as this very interesting case study, because we've had self-funders in Georgia and elsewhere before that have not had this degree of success in a very short period of time. He kept the campaign under wraps, and when he finally decided to announce and went up on television, the polls immediately moved. And so I think I'm only calling this out because I think there are implications for the Democratic race as well. You will see oftentimes very wealthy businessmen and women say, I'm going to dump a bunch of money, I'm going to give myself a loan to my campaign committee, but oftentimes not spend those dollars. You may see that with the Democratic campaigns, where you've got, former Mayor Bottoms, you've got former CEO Michael Thurmond, who've made loans, but they may decide not to ultimately spend them. Rick Jackson didn't do that. He put his money where his mouth was.
And not on the scale of tens of millions of dollars either. Stephen, is there a risk that as Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and Rick Jackson really just duke it out in a lot of negative ads going back and forth, is there a risk that they damage their favorability ratings so much that they create an opening for some of these other candidates, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, Attorney General Chris Carr, who have been polling, in public polls at least, in third and fourth place and outside of that runoff window, for them to get into the runoff window?
I think there's a chance, but it's a really, really small window. I think that either of those candidates, and Brad Raffensperger and Chris Carr, are going to have to play their hands absolutely perfectly to sneak into that runoff, and this negative barrage is going to have to continue. We've seen Chris Carr go up with a positive ad talking about law enforcement and public safety. I thought it was a good ad. I don't know if that's a vote determinant in Republican primary politics, given the fact that Lieutenant Governor has the president's endorsement, which is the gold standard in Republican politics, and given the fact that Rick Jackson is spending so much money. I think there's a small window for either candidate.
And Howard, last word to you on the Democrat side of things. At the beginning of our conversation, you said a lot of the major candidates on the Democratic side are effectively keeping their powder dry. They haven't gone up on air yet, except for former State Senator Jason Estevez. When does that change? When do the gloves come off?
Yeah, I mean, I think the traditional or conventional wisdom would say, April 27th or whenever early voting starts. You want to make sure you're communicating by the time people can actually cast a ballot. But, Georgia leading on early voting has really made Election Day the end of the election, not the election itself. And I expect that you've got a number of well-heeled candidates for governor, lieutenant governor, and United States Senate. There's going to be a lot of competition for attention in the airways, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, in 3 or so more weeks.
So what you're saying is we're going to be seeing some commercials on TV.
A few commercials,
And
yes.
clear your calendars for the 4 weeks after the May primary.
That's right, June 16th.
If Georgians are good at anything, it is voting. We've got a lot of practice on this. Howard Franklin, Stephen Lawson, thank you as always. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.